If you were a Sega Genesis owner during its run, you likely played a game or two by a company called Treasure. They were a team of ex-Konami employees that banded together to form their own studio in 1992. Their output on Sega's 16-bit machine garnered immediate attention from the gaming press and players alike. 1993's GUNSTAR Heroes was a Contra-like run-and-gun with some incredible visuals and gameplay. That same year, they took on making a game starring Ronald McDonald of all people, managing to turn out a surprisingly good-looking action platformer. 1994 had been a good year as well, starting with the weird and wonderful action game Dynamite Headdy. Some incredible effects in this one, and it has a gameplay variety that really set it apart from similar games at the time. Then came the fighting game Yu Yu Hakusho. It uses multiple planes to battle on, similar to Fatal Fury, and supported 4 players on the screen at once. It was never released in North America or Europe, but there is an English translation out there if you're interested. As 1995 rolled around, Treasure unleashed Alien Soldier on Mega Drive owners. This one was a fast and brutally difficult boss rush style run and gun. I was so pissed it didn't get a US release, but Europe lucked out and got it a few months after the Japanese version. Treasure's final Genesis release was like Crusader, an action RPG that was quite different from their earlier work, both in art style and gameplay. It's kinda an RPG for folks that don't normally enjoy the genre. When the Sega Saturn was released, most of us were quite curious which direction Treasure was gonna go with its first game. Would it be another run and gun like GUNSTAR Heroes, or would it be something crazy and unexpected? We got our answer in 1996 with the release of the beat-em-up classic Guardian Heroes for the Sega Saturn. Like their other games, this one had a special spin on the tried and true formula, and in this episode, we're gonna take a look at it and its lasting legacy in the Sega Saturn community. I hope you guys enjoy my review of Guardian Heroes for the Sega Saturn. When you think beat-em-ups, it usually conjures up images of stuff like Final Fighter Streets of Rage. You'd have one fighter out to right the wrongs of the world by kicking everyone's ass. While there is plenty of that in Guardian Heroes, Treasure also sought to add a bunch more to a genre that had been around for years at that point. The first major difference between this and most of the games before it was the inclusion of multiple planes to fight on. There is a front, middle, and back plane that you can switch on the fly. This gives you numerous possibilities during gameplay. You can use it to avoid incoming attacks and magic, or you can use it to get around enemies and attack their blind side. It also allows for both high and low attacks instead of the typical one combo hits everything. That brings us to the various moves your fighter has. One look at the moves list and you'll quickly realize that you have more attacks here than most beat-em-ups ever dream of. The nice thing is that it's not the same for everyone. Since there are more than half a dozen fighters, each one plays radically different from one another. Some use brute force to slay their enemies, while others used well-timed magic attacks to deal their damage, and some can do both. Once you learn the ins and outs, you can really rack up the combos and output the damage. Each fighter can also block attacks, an important element that helps mitigate the massive amounts of damage your enemies can inflict. All that is governed by a level-up system that's in place and very reminiscent of an RPG. After a stage is finished, you can use the points you've accumulated to increase your stats for things like vitality, intelligence, and strength. As you grow stronger, your damage output is dramatically increased, as is the amount of damage you are capable of taking. You can play the story with a friend, but there is also a 6-player Battle Royale arena-style mode where you can partake in a free-for-all or team-based combat. Usually I wouldn't spend much time on the story of a beat-em-up in a review like this. I mean, typically it's so simple and non-consequential that it really doesn't matter much. Guardian Heroes, on the other hand, bases much of its appeal on its story and your ability to interact with it. As you progress through Guardian Heroes, you will be faced with choices to make. These choices will greatly determine how things proceed, who you will fight, and ultimately the outcome of it all. There are 30 levels to fight across, though you will only see some of these for each playthrough. Each path leads to the possibility of a different ending, half a dozen in total. The core of this tale revolves around the evil wizard Kanon and his vendetta against the Sky Spirits, powerful beings that rule from above the earth. Kanon kills and replaces the real royal family so he can rule from the shadows, and thus the story begins. You become mixed up in Kanon's quest for revenge, find out there are much bigger problems to worry about, and meet an eccentric cast of colorful characters along the way. As you make your choices throughout the gameplay, you change the perspective of everything. Playing each and every path paints an entire picture of what's really going on, ultimately giving you a fair bit of replay value. Story matters in this one, and your choices have a huge impact on the gameplay. Treasure's choice to go with 2D in a game like this was a big one. Most games by 1996 had started switching everything over to 3D polygons, but they chose to double down on their 2D expertise and really give us a refined and well thought out experience. While some may disagree, I simply love the graphics engine in place here. It takes advantage of the Saturn's ability to put lots of 2D sprites on the screen at once, and even scales the entire playfield in and out, similar to something like Samurai Showdown. This is especially impressive because some of the sprites are absolutely massive, and to see all that at once was usually reserved for a console like the Neo Geo in previous years. There's also a load of special effects and transparencies popping off during the battles, and they too sometimes fill the entire screen. The animation is something else too, which has a style and variety well beyond the previous generation. The foregrounds and backgrounds have a lot of detail that I appreciate as well. There's a bit of pixelation on everything because of the way the engine scales in and out, but it never bothered me much with everything else looking so good. The lone area of disappointment for me was the slowdown you encounter. When there are many enemies and special effects happening, sometimes you can hit some pretty nasty performance issues. It doesn't last long and doesn't detract heavily from the otherwise excellent gameplay, but it's there and noticeable. Aside from that, I really like what's on display here, and I still hold it pretty damn high up on the list of great looking Saturn games. I'm not a fan of jazzy type music, it's just something that's never appealed to me. Most of the stuff you'll hear in Guardian Heroes is of a jazzy nature, but you know what? I still enjoyed most of it. Hell, I'd even go so far as to say some of it is excellent. Sometimes it's upbeat, sometimes it's dark, and sometimes it just rocks out perfectly to what's going on. I really enjoyed it, and here's a few examples to see if you do too. Where to begin on the positives of this one? I honestly could be here all day praising its graphics, sound, and gameplay. It looks great, sounds just as good, and the RPG elements and branching paths really do give it a ton of replayability. Grabbing some friends in this one equals a night of great gaming, and there really isn't anything quite like it on the Saturn outside of Capcom's Dungeons & Dragons collection. But with all that said, there still are a few things I just gotta bring up. The aforementioned slowdown is a black mark on the presentation. While I really dug how this game looks, It would have been so much more impressive had the performance stayed in step with the visuals. I'd also like to mention that while the RPG system in place here can be used quite effectively, I really wish Treasure allowed you to permanently build up each and every character under a single save file so you could use them whenever you wanted. The save system is actually kind of funky, limiting you to whatever is happening with your current playthrough. Once you start up a new game, that previous player and its levels are lost. Finally, there are some really long story sequences in there that you can't skip past. When I have 20 minutes to burn and want to play a good beat 'em up, I rarely choose this one because those sequences are major time sinks. With all that said, I still feel strongly this is a AAA experience on the Saturn and one of the platform's better games. The beat 'em up genre on a whole kinda took that generation off, apart from a precious few examples, and this here was among the top of that list. Looking back on Treasure's games for the Saturn, Guardian Heroes was my favorite by quite a bit. While Silhouette Mirage was interesting and Radiant Silvergun a graphical showpiece, neither one quite matched Guardian Heroes' raw playability. I've always admired Treasure's gumption to continue making 2D games in a 3D era. They stuck to their guns in the belief that they could make a game like this better with sprites instead of polygons. And with the end result here being so well done, I think they made the right decision. While it isn't perfect, the overall product more than lived up to my expectations, and it gave me and my best friend countless hours of gameplay. I always felt that a good 2D game was capable of coexisting among good 3D games, both complementing one another with a varied and unique experience. This is one of the reasons why the Saturn library always appealed to me so much. While I had access to some pretty killer 3D games, I also had a bunch of 2D stuff to mix in there as well. Unfortunately, Sega of America did not have the same level of confidence in Treasure's products as they themselves had. This here is the only Treasure game for the Saturn that made its way west for the platform, yet another shining example of Sega's leadership failing to recognize quality software. As sad as that is, it also contributes heavily to this game's appeal. There was only one Treasure Saturn game released in the US and Europe, so how could you not own it? Finally, if you are interested in a modern version of this, the Xbox Live Arcade port happened in 2011. It updated the visuals, added network multiplayer, and even enhanced some of the gameplay with new moves. It's backwards compatible on the Xbox One and Xbox Series X, and only costs $5. If you don't have a Saturn, it's a great alternative. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.